and welcome to the Seatton Education Podcast, where we delve into all things home education with expert guests. I'm Victoria. I'm joined today by Russ Hiebert, former member of the Canadian Parliament and homeschooling father of 4. Russ, thanks so much for being with me.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
Could you start by giving our listeners a better introduction to your background and to who you are?
Sure. Well, people often start by providing their educational background. So my area of studies was in communications and then philosophy, theology, science. I had an extensive undergraduate degree before moving on to law school. Practiced law briefly at a large firm, but didn't really enjoy that. So I went back and did a master's in business. And then shortly after that, I actually got elected to the House of Commons in Canada. And I was elected 4 times. And when I was first elected, we didn't have any kids. And by the time we left, we had 4. And so that was instrumental in me choosing to leave politics so that I could spend more time with my family.
Particularly because if you just explain that you live on the west coast of Canada, and that is not where the Parliament is based.
Yeah, so Canada is a pretty big country. It would take me about 5 hours of flying time to get from my home to the capital. So with driving time, it'd be about a 7-hour trip every week. And that's a big commitment. And eventually we moved our family to the capital to spend more time. But then I was going the other direction, away from them. So we just realized that when our twin boys came along, that this wasn't working as well as we thought, and wanted an opportunity to do something else. And so after politics, I got involved in business interests that keep me busy.
I see. And so now your children are teenagers,
Mm-hmm.
and you're based back in Vancouver.
Yeah, just outside of Vancouver. Yeah, busy household.
Yeah, okay. Yes, absolutely. And your eldest daughter she's just left home, or she's still at home, but she's in post-secondary education now, isn't she?
So she's going into her second year of university, just turned 18, and she's mostly studying from home. We have a local university that's a very good school that she's attending, so that works well for her. But she has plans for postgraduate studies that will take her far away from home, so this is just her first step.
And were you home educated yourself, or is this a new world to you when you had children?
No, I was a student of public school in my community, a pretty large high school, I would say, for the area in which I lived. We probably had close to 1,000 students for high school anyway. So yeah, mine was a typical, I would say, modern Canadian educational experience.
And so did you foresee that home education would be part of your family's journey when you were younger, or is this
Not at all.
It was something that you came across?
Yeah, no, I didn't honestly know any other families that were home educating when I was a student of that age. It's a relative modern phenomena, actually, if you think about it. It wasn't until the 1980s that the home education movement really took off. And it required, certainly in the U.S., the challenging of state legislation because people were unaccustomed to that. But now we're into, you could say, the 3rd, maybe 4th generation of home educating families. So you have parents who were home educated that are now teaching their kids and so on. So it's really taken a life of its own.
And that's interesting because you touched on legislation there. You were an MP for several years, as you said, re-elected several times as well. So a successful MP. Did you ever feel conflicted that you were, part of the government and your children weren't going to government schools?
Not really. I mean, you're always politically aware of the questions that people might ask, but the way things are organized in Canada, I was involved in federal politics, and the national government does not have an education role. That's a provincial responsibility according to our constitution. So I wasn't directly legislating at all in the area of education. But people, might ask, well, where do your kids go to school? And it was an easy answer for me because in the province that I'm from in British Columbia, there's a lot of support for choice in education. And for many, many years, even before I got elected, home education or distance learning was an option that was supported by the provincial government. So
Mm.
there's many thousands of students that were doing what we did when we registered our kids to be home educated in our province. Not every province in Canada is like that or as supportive. They have different degrees of support. But for us, it was a pretty common, relatively common choice. I wouldn't say that it's a high percentage of students in our province that choose home education, but it is one that has the imprimatur or the support of the public government as an option. And I think that's really important that parents have choice in education. We could talk more about that, but I think that's critical that parents are recognized as the primary authority in their child's life when it comes to education and are supported accordingly.
And here in the UK, we have a national curriculum, but that's not the case in Canada, is it? And is there even a provincial curriculum set by the area, or is that not even a concept?
No, there is. Every province has its core curriculum, and it's usually guidelines. It's not, very, very specific, but it's become more and more generalized over the time that I've been following it. And I think that provides some greater latitude for teachers or for home educators, to check the box, so to speak. But there's still many parents that choose who home educate that choose not to, they register their child, which is basically informing the government that they are home educating, but also informing them that they will not be following any curriculum guidelines. So there's those two choices, right? You can follow the provincial curriculum as a home educating parent, or you can just abandon that entirely and just do your own thing. And both are supported.
You're obviously in a province where the choice in education is supported. That is not the case in many countries around the world, or different states or governments take different approaches to that. What do you think, as both a former member of parliament and a homeschooling father, what do you think it is that concerns some legislators and governments about home education?
Well, honestly, I think it's a mistaken understanding or perception about home education, or what I prefer to call parent-directed learning, which is really what it is. There is misinformation or presumptions that are made by legislators that they were taught in public school. Like, if you think about it, Victoria, the whole school system tries to inculcate this belief in parents that you're only an expert or only someone else is qualified to teach your child. But that's actually not the case, especially in the early years. Certainly, maybe in the high school curriculum, it gets more complicated. But then even there, what we found from our own experience is that self-directed learning, the child can learn an amazing amount of information. But what legislators believe, because they've all gone to public school for the most part, is that that's the only model that should be followed, and so they have blinders on when it comes to the alternatives. But what the research has been saying now for many, many decades is that the best environment for a child is one that is customized to their areas of interest, that is taught by someone they believe that loves them, that can very quickly adapt to their needs and their questions, that they can use a sibling, either an elder sibling, as a role model for success, or teach what they've learned to a younger sibling, therefore cementing their knowledge. These are all facts that came out during the conference at which we met. And the summary statement that summarizes all of these conclusions that I've just mentioned was made by Dr. Deborah Bell when she said, if you were to build a school based on the best academic research as it relates to schooling generally, or to education generally, you would build a home. because all those things are present. You have a parent, not a school, not a teacher-student ratio of 20 or 30 to 1. You have a 1 to 1 or 1 to 2 or 3, depending on how many children. You have a parent that loves their child in a way that a public school or a private school teacher could never love. And you wouldn't expect them to love your child like a parent would. And you have the ability to revise or adapt the learning of your child to their particular needs, again, that you can never accomplish in an institutional setting like a school. And all of those factors lead to great success. And this is not speculation. The PISA scores by the OECD, if you look at them, in all fairness, they show home-educated students at the top of the charts, academically, socially, civic engagement. There's no question anymore that they're as good or better than publicly educated students.
And I think that research, and as more people go through home education, that research is becoming richer because, of course, the sample size is increasing. And I think that's really interesting because it's quite clear now, as you say, it is not it's not a couple of outlying statistics. We are seeing a really clear trend that home educated children do well. And I think that's particularly interesting when you look at people's reasons for home educating, because actually that group might have a higher proportion of children who either started off with a negative opinion of school if they've left education, mainstream education, or maybe the family has some specific need that they want to address. And yet still with those people in that cohort, the evidence is such that you can see they are academically performing very well and socially performing very well. I think that's quite interesting.
Mm-hmm. And it's not really a surprise, right? Like, if you think about it, whether it's health-related concerns or others, we live in an environment where choice is preferred, or customization is better. And institutional education doesn't have that option. It teaches to the average student at best in a particular class with a one-size-fits-all curriculum. And we don't all fit the average. We're not all that, the average person. And then so it's even unrealistic to expect that an institutional setting could provide anything close to what customized learning could provide in an environment where there's a loving parent involved.
And I think as well, with your public servant hat on, financially, it would not be possible to create that situation in a public school setting. I mean, if you were looking at ratios of 1 to 4 in a class, or, teachers who would do it without getting a salary, those things just, the real politique of life is that those things can't happen, can they?
No, they can't. But we haven't talked about some of the downsides of public education, which is one of the reasons why we started down this path to begin with. Would you like to go there?
Please. Join me for the second part of this conversation in the next episode. See you then.